Coming to you from the Tar Heel State, this is the Carolina Commercial Real Estate Connection, bringing you industry insights and hot takes from Carolina real estate experts, helping you begin, grow, and scale your commercial real estate portfolio. And now your hosts, Tony Johnson and Cameron Pearson.
Good morning to all the aspiring and active commercial real estate investors out there. Thanks for tuning in to the Carolina Commercial Real Estate Connection. If you enjoy the content from our show today, please like and subscribe to our channel. Today we have Christian Cardamone on the show with Aloha, Wilmington Property Management, and Keller Williams. Today we're going to do a deep dive in the advantages of using a small local property manager and the twists and turns of investing in a volatile marketplace. Chris has been in the industry since his teens and invested in various types of real estate since then and has a tremendous amount of industry knowledge. We hope you enjoy getting to know him a bit on the show today. Thanks for joining us here today at Carolina Commercial Real Estate Connection. We have Christian Cardamone here joining us, who is a Wilmington native, been here for a long time. Mover and shaker in the real estate market here in Wilmington, North Carolina, and been in the industry for a number of years. And he's a good looking guy too. We got to move this around here so we can get him in the picture. We got him in the big picture, but we'll get him in all the pictures. So many pictures, it'll make it work. So Chris, thanks so much for sitting in with us today. And I guess we'll start out getting a quick background on you, how you got into real estate, and how long you've been in the area, and a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Let's see. Turn back the clock to 1996. Moved here from upstate New York. Went to 1 year of high school and then got out, went to UNCW, and have obviously stayed here ever since. I love Wilmington. One of my probably second or third jobs was working for you, Tony, at the Rhino Club. I guess working downtown. Started meeting people, networking, and got excited about real estate. Bought my first house when I was in college, rented it out, figured out how the real estate game worked, and got really excited about that. So got licensed, I think, in 2004, maybe. So it's been almost 20 years of sales. And started with Remax. Got a little taste of commercial real estate just before the market crashed, and have been going at it full time ever since. And I don't think there's a better job to have in Wilmington, except for maybe being a mortgage lender.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that now, because,
Or general contractor.
GC.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's a good market. This is a good growing market. So I think that we're all lucky to be in a good area. So I didn't realize that you moved here in 96. That's actually when I moved here. And so had Frank been living down here? Frank is Christian's older brother. He'd been living down here before that, and you came down?
Yeah, I think because I could be wrong, but I think you guys started college the same year. You guys were friends back then, but he was here maybe a year or two before everybody. And that's when my parents were like, "Why is our son living at the beach? Let's bring the snow. Let's all go to the beach." So we did.
Yeah. Down there.
Well,
Yeah, that's awesome.
being born and raised here in 96, I saw a shift downward quickly. I don't know if it's in correlation. 96, yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, awesome. Well, that's awesome. Good background on you. Yeah. Me and Chris worked together at a bar, and Chris ended up opening a bar. I opened in a bar, and we had a good time with that for a few years before, we got into real world work. I think it's how I would approach it. Yeah. So Chris, now you were saying, you bought a home when you were still in college and rented it out to a couple buddies. I can feel like I remember that. And that was kind of the kickoff to you getting into real estate. What gave you the idea, or how did you make the decision to do that? How did you put that together?
My parents had rental properties up in New York, and when we were younger. So I don't really have any memory of them being in real estate when I was older up there, but they did, and they talked about it quite a bit. And so they encouraged me to buy a home. And I used my student loan to buy my first house on Michelle Drive.
This is how you got to get creative.
Yep.
And creative.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Got on the internet, got a student loan. They mailed me a check for like $7,000. I couldn't believe it. I bought a house. First, I rented the whole thing out, and then I was living down on the beach using that was, the rent was covering my mortgage and a little bit of my rent down at the beach. And I mean, like a light bulb went off. It's like, these people are paying my mortgage and allowing me to live on the beach for free. Let's do more of this.
Mhm.
And
Oh
so,
my gosh, how old were you then?
let's see, probably 18 or 19.
That's just amazing.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Starting at a young age. That's so awesome. Now, so you went through that and you got your real estate license in 2004, and so you rode that and you grew that business significantly, right, up in the market, and then you got into commercial before the market crashed. What commercial were you getting in? Was it some multifamily, or what were you getting into?
The
The
first,
commercial buildings?
yeah, I started kind of off downtown because that's where we were spending most of our time. And that's where I was making the most contacts, was kind of right in the immediate downtown area through the bar business when we were working there. And the first building that I listed that was commercial was right at the corner of Front and Market Street. There was a sign up with an agent from Raleigh who listed 2 buildings there. And I called her and said, you need some exposure in our local market. You're not in our MLS or anything like that. So she was very quick to realize that she needed to be listed down here and not just on the national MLS. So that was kind of like a co-list that I got. And, you know, the commission was almost twice what a residential commission was. Once we got under contract, it was just a smooth deal because most commercial buyers are not as emotional, you know, they're not as attached to the aesthetics of a property, whereas they see the financial, you know, data and projected income that an asset can generate.
Not living in it, not getting emotionally attached to it as much.
Exactly.
Right.
And I just felt like, wow, I can make more money and this is easier. And it's just, people are more pragmatic about their decision making because the numbers do most of the talking.
Did you stay in the residential side as well because of the crash? Well, it would be interesting that you didn't just kind of cut off that tentacle and move forward to just commercial.
Oh, well, I mean, when the market crashed, when I first got in, the fish were like jumping in the boat and I was making more money than I'd ever seen before. It was amazing. I mean, everybody was though.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So, when the market crashed, I got into distressed property because I saw that was you had to kind of evolve with the market. And then there was so many short sales and foreclosures. I got a couple of designations and figured out that angle. That's what kept me going through the doldrums when it really, because, you know, we had probably 2,500 realtors in the market back then. And I remember it dropping down to like 1,000 or 1,200. It just iced everybody that wasn't willing to pivot. So I got into distressed property, and then I stayed in residential and commercial pretty much the whole way through. Just because our market doesn't have, it does, but I wasn't gonna just go in one single direction. But we don't have a huge commercial market, you know, so we don't, I wanted to be able to diversify. And also, if I had friends that were calling me that wanted to buy residential houses and stuff like that, so I never wanted to say no to that because it was.
It's a note of the money, yes.
No.
Especially when we were building that market up. I mean, yeah, when you go from 2,500 agents down to 1,200, obviously, you know, there's a lack of business that's driving that. So you want to get anything you can get and keep busy. And even when the market's booming right now, you know, letting go of that, if you've got the time and the resources and you can build up a team to handle that, I imagine you don't want to let go of either one, right?
No, and when something like that happens too, it's really it's a ability to grab more market share. When half the people leave the space, you can either do what you need to survive, or you can realize that, oh my gosh, this is opportunity.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's where most of the businesses grow or fail quickly. But I was able to flourish through that. From a professional standpoint. From a personal standpoint, I thought my eyes got bigger than my stomach, and I bought a ton of real estate, and then ended up getting my clock cleaned when the market did crash. So I was kind of on both sides of the market there and experiencing that, which was quite an interesting ride.
So, well, I mean, I think that would be great to share if you're okay with sharing about that, just to let everybody learn. I mean, because now is a similar situation, right? That you would look at this, you know, with a microscope. You know, it's a different environment with the inflation as opposed to the bad mortgages, right? But there's still, you're seeing a kind of a tipping point with some banks going under right now. So that's kind of the first inclination that there are more underlying problems than are being related. It's beyond the inflation. There are problems now. So now the rates have been raised. a lot of these banks are, taking on money and they're underwater now,
Yeah.
right? So that in the long run, they can't sustain it. So though they're floating and some have gotten bailed out, as it's been right now with Morgan Stanley, taking that one, but there's more, and there's tons. You hear inclinations of other major banks that are running into that problem. So, there are a lot of people right now wondering, is now a good time to jump in? Because you have seen hesitation in the market. So you looking at it from your perspective, do you think like right now is a great time as an investor, someone should jump in, whether it's buying rental properties or buying commercial properties? What would be your thought on it?
I mean, my default is it's always a good time to buy, because I'm an investor. That's what I love to do. That's what I help people do. So I'm never gonna sit and time the market. I think people that sit and try and time the market they're not serious about it. They're trying to get rid quick or whatever. So you can be strategic about it, but it's all about finding the asset and finding the leverage on it that can make the asset perform. If you can do that, it's always a good time. The challenge now is it's tougher to find good deals, I think, but they're still out there. You just have to work harder to find them. And I think what you had alluded to with the market shifting a bit because of the interest rate rise in a lot of these banks that did place notes 3, 4, or 5 years ago, most commercial notes have a 5 to 7 year term. So a lot of those are maturing here now in the next year, 2 or 3. And I was speaking to a lender the other day, and they were telling me 8.25% for a commercial loan, and I was like, my heart
trying to replace it with a 3.
A 3, yeah, and it's like there's a 5.25% spread on that. It's like it's really tough. You have to just get your mindset. I think that's the biggest thing for someone who wants to invest. You have to be able to adjust your mindset to the market that you're in, because the people that are saying, I can't invest in that because it's 5 points higher than what all my other assets are in. Well, okay, you have to respect that. But also, if you want to continue to invest, this is just the market that we're in. So,
right. So, I mean, going back to what you stated on there, it's making, so when it's a little iffy of a situation right now, the way to make something work is you have to look at a different term that potentially will make it work, right? So you could look at, if it's a multi-unit building where it's, the guy wants too much money, but he's only got 60 or 70% of the building occupied, and you can say, well, you're tired of dealing with the building. You can't seem to lease it all the way up. You've got 60 or 70%. What if I give you the rental rate that you're getting now, and I'll sign a master lease, guarantee you that rental rate. I'll buy it for your asking price once I'm able to stabilize the property, and that gives me the time to stabilize the property, and I can make a spread on that increase in rent while I'm doing it, and then get to your price down the road, right? So that's a good option. Or doing even seller financing, where he might have time left on his loan, but he's at that 3% rate, right? What are some other type of terms that you've seen coming through that would be workable in a situation like this, that somebody could, come to you and you might be able to help them find work?
I think value add, like you kind of were mentioned there, that's the play right now in this market. Because if you're going to look at an asset, piece of commercial real estate, maybe that's like a net leased investment, you can pretty quickly evaluate and underwrite that property. You can see what the asking price is, you can see what the income is and expenses, and arrive at the NOI and determine the cap rate and see if you can live with that based on your leverage spread. And then you can say, this either checks the box for me or it doesn't. But the way to find deals in this market or create them really, is finding properties and sellers who have an appetite for seller financing. If you can get in front of a seller who can understand, maybe a lot of mom and pops or folks that have had properties for 20, 30 years, those are your best targets for that, because they stand to have the biggest capital gain burden. So if you can get in front of them and show them how possibly seller financing can mitigate that over time on an annual basis versus like a lump sum, that's really attractive to someone who understands that. The other thing is it's a lower threshold for entry for you as a buyer.
Exactly.
And so that's another thing too. If you can get them maybe to finance your purchase money, then get a bank to loan you the initial acquisition lump, then if you're paying 8.25% or 8.5% for the 75% of it, but you're getting the purchase money. Maybe it's something, even a seller financing at 5% is still good, you know,
Yeah.
because they're not going to make that anywhere else. They might make 4% in the bank now, which is crazy. But I think being creative, finding properties that have been held for a while seem to have the most opportunity. If you can get in front of the seller who's reasonable.
And what's that opening phone call to that seller once you find it?
I'm a big fan of, I've done this a couple times and it's worked. It seems kind of crazy now, but getting in front of them, just work, because people who have properties in demand, their phone rings all the time.
Yeah.
And I never really, you don't think that all the time, but I went on a massive hunt for mobile home parks a couple of years ago and kind of cut my teeth on this angle. And after talking to a ton of owners on the phone, they would say they just get offers all the time, just unsolicited. They show up, they come across the fax machine or the email or whatever. So I found out that showing up and like stumbling across them, a lot of them work in their parks, they manage them, they're fixing stuff. That was an opportunity that I made some inroads a couple times and made some deals, because if you're in front of them and you're real, you have that conversation versus just being on the phone.
Yeah, and it's not just a number coming across. You start to hear what they really are looking for, so you can structure your offer to that.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to what you brought up, I think is a good point. You know, when you're finding these assets and these mom and pops that have owned it for 20, 30 years, they probably, you know, aren't the type of person that are running clean books where you can get these expenses and rent rolls of everything that they're doing, and you know, that's properly managed and where they're keeping up with their books, where you can properly place value and cap rate on it and running it normally. So that's where that fuzzy ability creates an advantage for a buyer, and you know, a seller, it puts them in a position where it's hard for them to, they might see a value, but it's hard to them to prove the value, right?
Correct.
So then that gives you some ability to negotiate with them and, you know, just trying to go through what hodgepodge numbers you're getting from them, right?
Yeah. We've had a couple properties that I've done in the past where approach the seller, they have a number in mind, couldn't come to terms, and then ended up pitching them on management for the property. Then we come in, help them take the load off, alleviate some of the stress of the books, and help them kind of get organized. Then two things happen. One, we can demonstrate to them what their property is actually worth over a period of 6 or 8 months where we have historical real data. And two, I can see what's going on. So I know where the bodies are buried after being there long enough versus buying a property and being stuck with it, placing it under management, getting a chance to take it for a test drive, and then saying, this thing is a dog with fleas, so let's just keep managing it. Or, oh, this thing is a cherry, and then I can give this guy what he wants because I can see what it can potentially produce. Or I can just show him and he or she still gets what they want. And so that's a really creative angle that's worked for me in the past.
That's a great angle.
And it's because the reason it's not a hard sell is because you're actually providing them a service in the interim. So you're not just trying to buy their property from them and take away their baby, you're helping them clean it up.
You're helping them clean it up. You're probably even creating a little bit of value for them, right? Increasing the value of their property. And yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I think, you know, somebody that's getting new into investing doesn't see. You know, they'll go out, look at the property, maybe get somebody to go by and, you know, write up a report of what's wrong with the property. But you really don't know. I mean, the seller's going to hide what's wrong with the property, right?
Yeah.
So the main things that they're not willing to mess with, that they can hide, they're going to, you know, keep you away from that. Don't look at this. You know, they know what it is. So you'll have your budget, and then you get in there, and it's the things that are going to show up the first 30 to 45 days that aren't in your budget. Those are all things that you're going to have to fix right now before you start to do what you plan was, right? So that's probably the biggest kicker. So do you have any, could you go through any time that you bought something that you run into something like that?
Oh man, this is gonna give me heart. It's early in the morning. We had one property I bought when I was doing the mobile home hunt for these clients a couple of years ago. Found it and was able to get in touch with the seller who was out of state, talk with them. I kind of lined up the whole deal for this buyer. The buyer decided ultimately they weren't going to enter that marketplace at all. So they went on to a different market. And since I had kind of teed this thing up perfectly, we just went ahead and bought it. Was able to negotiate some great seller financing terms. Anyways, got into the properties, multifamily 61 unit property. And come to find out it had, it was on public sewer and water. But we had plumbing issues for the first few months, and there was still septic tanks out there that we didn't know about. So for the first few months, plumbers were going and pumping septic tanks that had been not touched or opened in decades because we were on city sewer now.
Right.
So that was a little bit of a mystery we had to solve because we had management that didn't know anything about the property in a different state. And then, you know, then the other kind of horror story about that was we had an issue with one of the tenants called, because I ultimately started managing this property after we bought it as well. And got a call about a geyser pretty much in the back of the property that had been going off. And I spoke to the town, I was like, how long has this been doing this? And she said, it's been a couple of days now. And we had a busted water pipe that was just shooting up water. We got like a $20,000 water bill. And it was just, you know,
3 days.
I'd rather not talk anymore about it.
Oh,
But that was one of the things where, you know, your due diligence on a property, or had I been managing that in advance for a few months, understanding there's 1 meter. So when you shut the water off to make a repair, it goes off to 61 people.
Yes.
Things like that you need to know about, you need to kind of be strategic about. And then also having good help. And if you can't be there every day, had someone reported that 5 days earlier, it could have been a tremendous savings.
Now, was that personal capital that you bought with, or did you raise capital for that?
That was personal.
All personal?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're carrying the bullet.
Yeah, so that hurt.
But it also doesn't, there's no cash call. So,
I mean,
you know,
it's just, it was
to you.
the cash calls to himself.
right here.
Yeah, right in the pocket. Yeah. So have you done any deals with partners? Have you self-funded everything that you've ever done?
I have a couple partners that I work with that are where most of the time we're 50-50. I haven't done anything with more than 2 partners. I used to think that partners were just for dancing, and it's just, you know, but I've come to learn there's more opportunity out there if you're willing to. A little bit of something's better than nothing, I think. And then also the biggest thing is it mitigates the burden of a $20,000 water bill when you got a partner to split it with, and you have more access to resources. So I figured out at a certain point, if I was going to be a full-time investor, that having partners wasn't essential, but it certainly broadened my horizon. So why not?
Yeah, allows you to, you know, kind of scale a lot quicker, right? I mean, otherwise one man show, it becomes difficult. There's only so much money you're going to have to invest. So especially if you find, you know, 1 or 2 good partners, you know, that just want to place capital, that don't have much interest in being involved, it really turn beneficial. You know, or you can always, as we've discussed a couple of times before now, you can go towards that syndication model and try and, you know, raise smaller amounts from a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think, without being greedy, there's enough out there for everybody. And if you can find partners that have skill sets in certain wheelhouses that, you know, you can't do everything.
Mhm.
So if you've got a group, you know, a group like this, where you've got someone who's excellent at finance, someone who's excellent at real estate, someone who's excellent at construction, that's like the perfect combination.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's get on MLS, let's talk shop. Yeah, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. If you have someone who has expertise in that, when a problem does arise and that partner's willing to handle it, they're worth their weight in gold at that point.
That partner is extremely important, because what you don't want is getting in a partnership with someone where you end up getting stuck, right? Doing a lot of the stuff. So writing up those agreements, and, you know, definitely vetting if you're trying to partner with someone. And we're not giving anybody any financial advice or real estate advice, but if you're partnering with anybody, you know, make sure that they have an understanding of real estate. So, you know, we're talking to Christian here, he's been in real estate for 20 years. So, you know, when he talks, we're listening, but we know he understands what he's talking about. He has that experience. So someone
like, to that point, I mean, I've been in lending for 20 years.
Mhm.
Just this podcast alone, it's hearing where you're coming from on that side, I've never delved into. So it's really interesting. There's so many pieces. So yeah, bringing someone like you and you who have those different visions and angles, it just really supports what I offer.
Right, yeah, and everybody, has a good skill set, just like underwriting and somebody that can sit there and do the underwriting, somebody that's great at finding the assets, going out and meeting those people, those owners of buildings, and that can build a quick relationship, and then, finding somebody that can network, even if you need additional capital as you grow. There's so many different facets. So, especially if you're trying to get into larger deals and grow your company into something, you have to be able to leverage the abilities of others and partner and, give up some capital to get going and expand your presence in the market. So going back to the mobile homes, I think that's a great market right now. It's obviously grown a lot in the last 10 years. It went from nobody would want to do anything with it to now I think the cap on those are just 5 and 6 in some areas, right? And which is absolutely nuts. Now, on the ones that you had, did you own the mobile home or were you just doing land leases?
A combination of both. So the last one I had, there's different models in real estate investing with mobile home parks. So some folks just like to do, they call it lot rent only, where you just rent the home sites to folks. Some folks do park owned homes, they call them, where you would own the homes itself and rent. Then kind of in your books, you break up a lot rent and a home rent, combine those for the total, just for a way to kind of underwrite it. And reconcile your books with those, but we had a little bit of both, and the homes that we owned, the park was an elderly, I'll say, and so a lot of the homes we had were from the 60s and 70s. So maintaining homes that are 50, 60 years old, that's the biggest. It's the biggest thing you have to watch out for.
Right, because that's where you can really get caught. So I mean, obviously, if you just buy a mobile home park and it's lot rent and that number works, then man, and it's all the onus for the maintenance of those mobile homes is on the the tenant, then that's a completely different ball game.
Yeah,
When they own their own mobile homes and you're just lot rent.
that's the best case scenario. I mean,
Right.
I've met a guy in Myrtle Beach one time. It's like super redneck. He's like, can't hurt my dirt. I can't hurt my dirt.
Can't hurt my dirt.
Sure.
Can't hurt my dirt. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's funny.
No.
Okay, so let's go dive into the property management a little bit, because that's a great thing that you're doing, and you've kind of started the property management. How long ago did you get into property management?
I had been doing it pretty much since the beginning, since early to mid 2000s. I started doing it just for the properties that I had. I was obviously managing myself, and then I had friends and family that had assets that I was managing. It was mostly residential for the longest time, and then as I would sell things, I referred it out for the longest time because it didn't seem to make sense. If I rent rent was cheap back then too. So like, a house was $1,200. I'd be like, I'm going to make like $120 a month. It's kind of like property management doesn't make sense until you scale, until you get a large portfolio, and then you have 100 properties making $100 a month. Then it makes sense, but you got to start somewhere, right? So I had just kind of done that and collected properties over the years, residential up until probably maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I decided to put a brand on it and a name to it and kind of make it its own, a little more professional, so that I could go out and solicit new business. But I have never.
What's the name of that business?
Aloha Wilmington Property Management.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many units are you currently managing?
Right now, I have about 136, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just in commercial asset class only. We had up until the end of the year, I had sold my residential portfolio.
Gotcha.
So I had about 260 prior to that. So we kind of sold that wing off, just decided to focus on commercial and have much less phone rings, a lot less.
Mhm.
A lot less headache. It's more of a bookkeeping business at this point.
Gotcha.
So what would set you guys apart from some of the bigger companies here in town? Why would a commercial tenant get a better experience with you than a bigger commercial outfit?
So there's two kind of lenses to look through. If you're a tenant or a landlord, we do tenant placement is kind of, I do that through Keller Williams, where I do my commercial brokerage. So if you wanted to rent a space, I'd be able to help you find a commercial space to lease. But from the management standpoint, if you're a landlord or a tenant, I'm a small company, and so I'm able to provide at least a personal experience to my clients. And by virtue of that, I don't want to get to a certain point where I'm so big where, I have a lot of respect for the bigger firms in town. But if you speak to any one of their tenants, it's a very impersonal experience. I don't need to badmouth anybody. The tenants tend to do that for them.
Right.
And I think in my experience, people either have a bad relationship with their property manager or no relationship with their property manager if they're a tenant. It's just, that's who I pay rent to, or I hate them, they suck. So it's a very low threshold to be good at, you know?
So for somebody who doesn't quite understand this and they're new into commercial real estate, let's just kind of walk them through. So if I'm going and buying, let's just say I'm buying a small 4-unit retail strip center, right? And I don't really know what I'm doing. So I need someone to manage this for me. It's my first investment. I've got 3 tenants in there. And so can you explain to me as a new person looking at getting into investing and I find this 4-unit building? So what are you going to provide me? Kind of walk me through the steps of everything that you're going to be doing for me.
Okay, so I mean, the first thing we want to figure out is stabilize the asset as best we can with regard to obviously occupancy, which means get it as occupied as we can, 95% or higher. We want to obviously just fill the space. So we'll help determine what the market rents are for the space in the condition they're in, determine if we need to offer any tenant improvement allowances or anything like that in order to have a carrot to dangle to tenants. And then we'll do tenant placement, tenant screening, and then draw the leases, put them into force, collect the deposits, and collect the monthly rent. So that's kind of step one, figure out how to maximize the income on the property. Then we'll, depending on the property, if there's, a drainage pond on it or something that needs quarterly or annual maintenance, if there's landscaping that needs to be done, if there's any sort of, if it's a well or septic, we'll basically place all those operating expenses and processes kind of under our umbrella. So
you're going to take the property and basically take this piece of property that I'm buying, organize it for me. So if once helping me stabilize it, you're going to help me find and place the right tenant, select the proper tenant, make sure that we're getting the background so we're not getting an underperforming tenant in right off the bat, at least giving us a better idea, right? And then you're going to help us maintain the property and make it look good and stay good, and then keeping clean records for us, right? And so all those things bring a great value long term, right? So when you're doing all that, we might be paying you a fee for doing all that, but in the long run, just like we talked about a little bit before, you're going to bring that value so we can actually get top dollar for our property if we decide to sell it in 5 years, right?
Totally. That's a great point. Is the paper side of this transaction is almost as valuable as the physical side, because we do quarterly inspections most of the time, since it's a small town and we have really good control over our portfolio. I'm going into these places pretty regularly anyway. Keep an eye out, talking to tenants regularly, at least once or twice a month, to find out if there's issues. So we get out in front of issues. I have a background in construction as well, a little bit. So we have the ability to identify things before they can become a problem. And then we handle the problems either before or when they arise. And we have preferred contractors that we use, so we get preferred pricing, which helps save the client money. So it's not a hard process. It's not anything that most people can't do. It's a whole separate job.
Well, and that's, you're bringing that to the table where someone who's an investor is thinking the paper side of it. They should hire their weakness, which would be not knowing all the things on the maintenance side. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we should speak a little bit more about, when we're talking about the big guys. So, we have, even in this market, which we're just a small market, right? We have national property managers managing properties around here, where the property management company might be in Tennessee, might be in New York, right? And so what difference is it going to make to have someone like Christian here who can go and actually visit the property on a weekly, monthly basis, quarterly basis? It really doesn't matter. He's a phone call away from being, 5 minutes away, 10, 20 minutes away from wherever the property may be, as opposed to you calling a large property management company who just is looking at it through a camera remotely, or has somebody here that isn't really associated with them, that they're subbing out to maybe go by and look at the property, right? So
Yeah.
What kind of value difference would that create?
I mean, it's intrinsic for sure, because you see, like Mayfair, for example, you call someone across the street, and like you said, you got someone in Tennessee who's like, let me look up on the computer. I don't even know what property you're talking about.
Right.
I don't know anything about it. Whereas here, if you go and if you're an investor and you own a strip center with 4 units in it, you have a vacancy. My relationships with your other 3 tenants is going to help place that 4th tenant a lot faster than someone just waiting for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
Because you can't think that someone who's going to sign the lease, they're not going to ask the neighboring tenant, well, how is it over here? Right? Of course, that's going to be the first question that you're going to ask. If I'm going to lease a space, I'm going to go talk to the neighbors, be like, I mean, how is it over here?
Yeah.
Do these people take care of stuff? Do they treat you right? Is this place a dump? What kind of, is
Exactly.
this place maintained well? And all those things speak volumes to whether you're going to be able to place a tenant or not, right?
100%. Yeah. And after you do that, the ability to create a reconciled rent roll, operating cash balance sheet, everything like that. After operating for a period of time, giving that to your owner, we provide them on a monthly basis, and they can access them anytime through our portal. But having the ability to print out all of your books, and they're just crystal clean, crystal clear at the end of the year for your accountant, provides a ton of value. They don't have to go and call and say, what repairs do we have? Or let me go back and look at my canceled checks. And these are all the rents that came in. If they want to refinance their property at any point in time, all they've got to do is provide this packet to their lender, versus having to go through and forensically say, did I put a roof on that thing, or did I do the HVAC or whatever? So
right, just to get a software to do your own property management is going to equal the property management fee. If you go on like Appfolio and get a membership for there, these things, then you're taking the time out of your day. You could be out hunting for other investment. It makes no sense not to use a property manager, especially on commercial projects. So I'm glad to hear you're expanding in the market. I think you're a great asset for people to reach out to for that type of a service if they're getting into it. So let's go through a little different avenue now that we've gone through that, because you have so many different facets of what you're doing. So on the commercial side, when you're finding deals and sourcing deals for somebody that's looking for commercial property, do you network and find off-market deals? How do you go about that? Do you just kind of help somebody search through MLS and underwrite it with them? What's your process, and how do you normally help someone find what they're looking for?
So commercial MLS is a bit of a different animal than residential. Like residential MLS generally has everything, and most people have access to it through some syndicated website, realtor.com or Zillow or something like that. Commercial MLS is kind of like this weird dark horse where the general public doesn't necessarily know how to access it, how to see what's out there. There's new websites that have come up to kind of open the marketplace and expand it to make it more accessible. LoopNet, Crexy, CoStar are kind of the big ones where people can kind of take a glimpse of what's out there. But most of the commercial stuff, in my experience, a lot of it is off market, and it's networking through other brokers who have something that they just kind of have in their pocket, or they know a client they sold a property to a couple of years ago. Commercial property doesn't go on the market generally. If you look at the number of listings in a commercial marketplace versus our residential marketplace, it's like this.
Right.
And so the biggest value you can provide as a broker, a commercial broker, is your relationships with other agents in the town. And it being a small town, it's nice to know the majority of them on some level. You've done a deal with them at some point over time, and you keep your nose clean and behave and do right by your clients and by the other brokers you're working with, and that provides a ton of value to the people that hire you to represent them.
Right. So I think, it boils down to, with the commercial market, that it's all about networking and knowing the market properly. It's a whole different animal. So you can't just go onto a commercial MLS, because half the properties that are even listed aren't on any MLS. There is, in North Carolina, we've got this commercial exchange, which is kind of our MLS, but there are multiple brokerages that don't even list on there. They'll only list on their own website. So you can't, there's not a central hub like what you said with Realtor for the commercial. So you've got to go to all the different websites. And the reason some of them do that, some of the smaller firms, is they want to make sure they're getting both sides of the deal. So maybe they're doing a disservice to their client, but they're trying to get both sides on a deal. And so you've really got to be able to navigate through that. So find someone like Christian where you can use his expertise and relationships in the area to network and find what else is out there that you can't find. Will really help you get into a market that you're not familiar with. Otherwise, you'll spend days, weeks searching and maybe still not find something that's even listed, maybe not on a joint exchange, right? But listed. So is that something that you run into quite a bit?
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of, in commercial real estate, I feel like you have to hunt out the deal, always, because like you said, a lot of firms will just put stuff on their website. A lot of folks that own property privately will just have an ad maybe somewhere in really like archaic base somewhere, or you have to drive by and see for rent signs in the window. So if I know someone's looking at a specific area or for a specific asset, I'm literally hunting for them on what it is I'm going to be going through, obviously starting with the MLS and then driving through the target area, knowing if I've done deals there in the past, any property owners in that area, other brokers who have done deals in that area, kind of communicating with them, seeing what's kind of up and coming, and just trying to be there. So when I work with the client, generally it's a pretty intense experience. If they're an A buyer or a B buyer or C buyer, I figure out where they're going to be. Are you A buyers, we're buying in the next 30 days. B buyer is we're buying the next 60, 90 days, maybe 120. C buyer is just keep you posted when listings come up.
Yeah.
So that's how I devote my attention to folks based on how fast they want to move. But when you're an A buyer and you're ready to roll, we're doing it. We're going hunting and until we find it. So, and the nice thing about it being a small geographic town that I've been in for so long is, most of the areas, you can do research pretty quickly or get out to an area to kind of sniff around. So.
Yeah, so the other thing that I think is a good to kind of bring up and touch on is, going back and kind of looping in the property management thing. So if we're just going back to just a multi-tenant building again, so we have a multi-tenant building and you have leases in place, you have tenants in there, they might not be too excited to hear that the place is going up for sale, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where these off-market deals a lot of times generate, because the tenants, they don't want the tenants to get freaked out that they're selling the place. They don't want to know about it. They don't want to go. And then that might, give you as a buyer some leverage, right? Now, Chris, who is a property manager, will know all about the space. So that guy can go to Chris. He can get a value from Chris. They don't need to do too much. Chris can relay the issues that might be there, or if he's not even property managing and he's helping you, he'll know maybe just being from the area, what might be wrong with that? What's the advantage location wise of that, right?
Yeah.
So if we were looking at those, what are some things that go through the process when it is something like that? Let's walk through an off-market deal. So let's say that you can either be one that you're property managing or one that we're finding that's off market. And so what would be the process? How would we approach trying to buy one like that?
Well, a property manager can be your best friend if you're looking for something commercial real estate, because you could call me or any other manager in town, depending on their, proclivity to make a deal. If most of all my clients are investors, so they're in the game. So they are always, even if nothing's listed for sale, everything's potentially available. So, and I don't share sensitive information with anybody, with general public at all, without permission of the client. But if you give me a call and I've got a database of 100 and X amount of properties that I'm managing, I can look through this portfolio and say, this is one that's performing at this level. Here's one performing at this level. Here's one performing at this level. There's value add on this, this. And I have all the historical data on it. So I know basically all the operating expenses, what's coming down the line, what's on the horizon. And then we have a direct relationship with that owner already. So I can present them a letter of intent and just get a discussion started and kind of feel them out, or present an actual offer.
And you have all the information of why the tenants aren't signing, right? So the tenants that aren't signing, why aren't they signing? So what improvements need to be made to that property to either get the rents up or get the tenants in there, maintain the tenants, or what's the tenant complaining about on a monthly basis, why they're about to leave? What could revert them leaving and get them to resign. You have all that information.
Yeah.
So man, I mean, he's like got that golden key for you,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, you have to maintain a good relationship with the, keep and understand that how important the property manager comes into play when looking at investing in real estate. And
Yeah.
man, I mean, it's been extremely informative having you here. Do you have other questions for him, Cameron? I mean, I feel like we've gained so much just listening from him here today.
Absolutely, man. And so like I said, coming from where I come from, this much information is invaluable, and it just kind of reestablishes that you need to have that other partner that has that skill set that you don't bring to the table. So thanks so much.
Yeah,
man.
thank you so much for coming out. I appreciate it. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach you?
ChristianCardamone.com is a great one. Aloha Wilmington.com is where our management company can be found, and we've got a menu of services and prices and everything there as well as our available inventory. Those are probably two best places if you want to reach out. Cell phone numbers 910-262-3399. Call, text,
Cool.
email, smoke
And
signal.
you on any social media?
I have a personal page on Facebook and Instagram. You can search by my name, and also Christian Cardamone Team is our brokerage site. And Aloha Wilmington Real Estate is where you can find us for the property management needs.
We'll put all this in the show notes too, so you guys can keep up. Man, thank you so much for coming in, man.
Yes, my
I really
pleasure.
appreciate the time.
Thank you guys for having me.
Great to see
Yeah.
you.
Appreciate it, man.